So indeed, in the first session, we kind of like laid the framework for the next of the session. We've seen some of the basics in action from the team that did the demo. Now we talk about getting from zero to production in a matter of minutes. 40 minutes is what we have for now. So I mentioned lean startup earlier and some of the concepts in there. So let's explore some of those, right? You know, what they talk about is that in a traditional world, you know your customer, you know the problem, you know the solution. But unfortunately, that's not the world that we live in today. Right now, many startups, actually, they might know the problem, but often they don't know the solution. And very often, they don't even really know what the problem is. So when it comes to lean startups, everything is about learning and then adapting, getting out something to market and iterating. And when you think about it, it's very much about focusing on a simple idea, a simple implementation of that idea, starting with a minimum core set of features, and then releasing that and listening to your users. That's referred to as a minimum viable product, or an MVP, the smallest thing that you can do to test your idea. Now, Werner talked about it this morning in terms of the power of the cloud when it comes to innovation and experimentation and driving that cost down. When you want to build a prototype of your app, of your business, you don't want big investments. It's too risky. What you want is something cheap and simple to validate your ideas. Anyone knows what this is? It's the first prototype of the mouse. It didn't cost a lot of money to make this, but it was perfect in validating the idea that the guys had about how you can actually interact with your PC. So, again, what we spoke about in the beginning was we're going to take you through these steps in the journey, and this session is very much around getting from idea to minimum viable product. And when you want to do that, two things matters most. First of all, the cost of innovation, and second, focus. So let me explain those in a bit more detail. I think Werner actually mentioned this one. If you want to increase innovation, you have to lower the cost of failure. And what AWS really tries to do is help you fail forward, as we say, or fail faster and fail cheaper. So I actually have a background in product development. 10 years ago, when I was in product development, everyone thought that this is what product development was about. When you get, over time, you develop your product, and at some stage you hit this line where you launch it into the market, your minimum viable product or your prototype, and it scales like that. Again, that's not reality. That's not how it works. It works more like this. You do some test and development, you launch something, you fail, you try it again, you fail, you try it again, and you go on and on and on. Some interesting proof points of that. Here's a company that started called Bourbon, and they were a location-based mobile app, and there was some photo sharing. Right? They tried it, it failed. They iterated. Became Instagram. $1 billion sold to Facebook. Super powerful product. Here's another one. Anyone heard of this company called Odeo? They were doing sharing and creation of podcasts. They had this small feature where you could communicate. They zoomed in on that feature. Microblogging, this Twitter. They failed significantly many times before they actually hit it. And then Rovio. Angry Birds. Everyone will know Angry Birds. What people don't know is that they actually developed 51 games that didn't really succeed in the market, that weren't that successful. And then they did Angry Birds. Boom. Raised $42 million, downloaded 1 billion times, great monetization, amazing, right? So I love this quote from the founder of Twitter, who basically says that timing, perseverance, and 10 years of trying will make you look like an overnight success. But for all the 3 examples I just gave, it might have looked like an overnight success, but it definitely was not an overnight success. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and again, iteration. So how can we help you with that? How can we help you iterate and drive innovation? Let's look at a scenario. We all know in the startup world this concept of incubators and accelerators, where you've got 3 months to develop something. And even if you're not in an accelerator or incubator, but in a startup outside of that, or even if you've been given, if you're in a larger company and you've been given 3 months to get something out to the organization and to your employees, you have this time pressure. So let's look at this scenario. You have a small team of developers. In this case, it might be a mobile app. You might have 3 months to develop it. Clearly, you're not sure about the problem, about the solution, about anything. And obviously, you have no cash to do it, right? So what can you do on AWS? Let's start. And it's color-coded here. Let's start in this, let's say, a first month of doing test and dev. On AWS, you can get a small little architecture set up to do that test dev. You see the DNS that they showed earlier, a load balancer, there's an EC2 instance, and a database instance, RDS. That will cost you, when you just get started and you open a new account, will cost you about $0. It's pretty cheap, right? That's your first month of test and dev. Let's say you take it to the next step. You go to your alpha release. You see at the bottom, you move up down the timeline. Roughly same architecture, but now I might have some internal people testing it. We do some load testing on it. Let's say we move from 1 to 2 EC2 instances. Cost per month for that period around alpha release and for testing your applications a number of times, about $15 a month. Still not really breaking the bank. Now let's go to your beta release, the first time that you go over that line of minimum viable product and where you're actually going to hit the market. It might still be contained. Let's say you have a few hundred or a few thousand users. Similar setup, but we now start using auto-scaling as well, so that when more users come, even within that 1,000 users, you can scale up. And maybe you change something in your database as well, where you start having a master and a read replica as well. Cost per month, roughly about $235. Obviously depends on a lot of different things, but that's roughly what you'll be looking at with an architecture like this. So where does that get us? Basically means that in 3 months, where you've done your dev, you've done your test, you've done your release, you've served beta customers, and you've actually got an architecture up and running that is still very small, but contains all the building blocks for something that can still scale seamlessly towards a larger production environment. It has your load balancer in there, it has auto-scaling set up and so on. $250 is all it costs you to do that on AWS. No physical boxes whatsoever. So that's really powerful, lowering that cost. Now, the second thing we talked about that's really important for startup is focus. When you're in a startup, or again, even if you're in a development organization and you want to speed up, this is the train, you want to speed up the production, you want to focus. You want to focus on your application. You want to focus on your business and what differentiates you, what works well. You want to focus on innovation, not on racking and stacking of boxes. And I often joke it's a deep insight alert. In other words, it's not. Everyone knows it. But developer time is money. And what we see in startups is that staff costs are the highest cost. So if I can be more efficient, if I can be more focused on the things that really matter, then that's really powerful. Now, it's not just us that say that we help focus. Klein & Perkins is one of the largest venture capital firms in the world. And what they've said is that startups are all about focus. And that AWS enables focus. And Instagram is actually referring to the same when they say that your users around the world don't care whether you wrote your own database. Leverage the building blocks that there are, automate as much as you can, and that's the only way they've been able to actually scale to the size that they have with only a few engineers. Okay? So, focus requires automation. And what the previous demo showed already, to some extent, was how you can start scripting things and how there's tools available and SDKs available. And in a way, the way we can look at that is almost like a continuum with a range of services we have. Like on one side, and for those in the back, you might not be able to see it, but this is a continuum. All the way on the left, you have like maximum control, and all the way on the right, you have maximum convenience. Okay? So you can build everything yourself with EC2 and EBS and do what they've just done on stage, which is great. You can automate a bit more by using services like CloudFormation, which is basically allows you to create templates that drive your deployment and manage it like a template-driven form of provisioning. Moving a bit further, you have something like OpsWorks, which we launched not that long ago, which is basically a chef framework for application lifecycle management. And then all the way to the other end, we have Elastic Beanstalk, which is basically an automated resource management. It's really web apps made easy, a sandbox for your web apps. It's Al again. I think let's get Ganesh on stage as well, and let's make sure that we kind of like show you that, because Beanstalk is super powerful when it comes to getting from 0 to production in 40 minutes. It really allows you to take your app, plunk it into Beanstalk, and get up and running. And I'm sure you guys can show that in a bit more detail.